ask Viv Pugh from the Dic Penderyn Society to come up and speak. I'm down from Merthyr, so...
Okay, thank you folks. I'm going to take an historical viewpoint of Dic Penderyn. I am a politician, but it's the old saying, when does a politician lie? As soon as he opens his mouth. Most of the information we have about Dic Penderyn is from Tory sources, Tory politicians, or Tory newspapers. So I'll just read you one of the dozens of letters that went from Crauchete to the Home Secretary during the course of the Merthyr Uprising. The Prime Minister has just received news of a serious civil disturbance in the Welsh industrial town of Merthyr Tydfil. Workers are requesting union recognition. Were fired upon by the army. 26 peaceful demonstrators were killed, probably a figure near 100. There's repeated fire by the troops. Hundreds were injured, dragged away to die later on. Our men, as the troops, received cuts and bruises, and one private had a serious fire wound. The crowds fled home after rapid volleys of fire from our men. No looting occurred. Only the Court Request building was ransacked and fire damage to the front door. The Prime Minister receives this. Bear in mind, 1831, very much similar today. There's rioting going all over Manchester, Liverpool, all the big towns over the Reform Act, which has promised so much for the working class but failed to deliver. So against this background, the Prime Minister doesn't accept this report for publication. So bear in mind what I've just said about a civil disobedience and a little event. So he spins it out again. Spin doctors are not new, they've been around for 2,000 years or more. In the Welsh industrial town of Merthyr Tydfil, serious riots occurred. The term riots emphasises drunken, disorderly bands, not an uprising. Now, uprising suggests thought, deliberation, a plan. This is why a lot of English historians and those Welsh people who are not educated call it a riot. It's an uprising. There was a plan behind it.
Gwynalf said the rising.
Yes, Gwynalf. Gwynalf is the book to read. Forget all the rest, read Gwynalf. Drunken workers without a plan, demanding higher wages and shorter working weeks. In brackets, leave out the political and social demands. An angry mob tried to break into the Castle Inn and seize the ironmaster's presence. The soldiers were forced reluctantly to open fire, killing 26, forgetting all the rest, wounding others. The army suffered casualties, and at the time there was a big play and all these lists were published. Private head wound, private leg wound, private thigh wound, army. All published, reams and reams of them. Years later, the 26 deaths were published. Attempted murder of a private by stabbing with a bayonet. The army have now controlled the town after 5 days of mob rule. So it begs the question, why celebrate the death of Dic Penderyn and the uprising of 1831? Well, first and foremost, we're not celebrating the hanging today of Dic Penderyn, we're celebrating the heroic deeds of Dic Penderyn and the positive aftermath of the events of 1831. Who was Dic Penderyn? The character who dominates the scene that we know so little about. I was chatting earlier on and I said, well, if you're relying on historical facts, you can put them on the back of a postage stamp. All the rest is fabrication. What are the established facts about Dic? And when I mean established, I mean historical proof. Not that some historian or writer has written just to sell a book. Date of birth, place of birth, unknown. We haven't got a birth certificate. Crauchete mentions he's from the Aberavon area. Quite a few people later on. No birth certificate. Your guess is as good as mine. Even if he was born in 1808. So place of birth and where he spent his childhood is unknown. It's fabricated by later writers. Why didn't they register births, deaths and marriages? Well, we gathered here in a church today. The dominant religion of the time was the Anglican Church, a religion imposed by the English state on the people. The people, Aberafan, Merthyr, wherever they were 99% Welsh-speaking. They wanted their own church, a Welsh-speaking church that was non-conformist, not conforming to the Anglican Church. They didn't want to pay the fees for registration of births, deaths and marriages. Why should they? They didn't want to pay tithes to the local Anglican Church. Why should they? What was Dic Penderyn's trade? Again, various places in Wales we associate him with. Merthyr's the uprising, Cardiff where he was murdered, hanged by the state. This area, legends have been settling. We know he was in Newport because we've actually got census returns of him working in Newport. It's the area where his brother-in-law was living at the time. His trade, when he died in Merthyr, ironstone miner. Age of death, well we know this because we got the death certificate. Age 23, again murdered by the English state. It wasn't a trial, it was a kangaroo court. The Welsh working class were guilty. Let's make an example of them. Who's Dic Penderyn? Well, he's not really the organiser. But if he's an innocent man, God help the rest, isn't it? And that's the whole point. He's an innocent man, he's a man of the crowd. Parents, and no marriage certificate, no birth certificate. I've come across a reference to his father's name being Lewis Lewis. Not Lewis Lewis, the trade union organiser, but Lewis Lewis. Again, a common name of the time. Sister we know of, brother-in-law Morgan we know about. What is Dic Penderyn's crime? Well, if he was being charged today, and I was talking this the other day with a solicitor, any solicitor worth his salt that had more than an O level in law would have got Dic Penderyn off. Because when they read the Riot Act in Welsh, and then they read it in English, they named the wrong monarch. So that would have devalued any court case that followed. But he went ahead. What was his real crime that we can pinpoint with historical fact and not myths and legend? Well, he was charged with treason. This is the easiest one to find a guilty verdict. You've got to prove yourself innocent, not the state prove otherwise. He was guilty of unlawful assembly, because when the Riot Act was read, he was supposed to disperse. Was he in Merthyr, outside the Castle Inn at the time of the stabbing? Highly unlikely. Dozens of witnesses put him at the other end of Merthyr town. Why weren't they called as witnesses? Well, the thing I love about history, it repeats itself time and time again. The reason why the eyewitnesses weren't called at the state-run trial was because all the eyewitnesses were working class. And working class men, women, and even children were regarded as liars, full stop. So we disregard their testimony. Dic's role in the uprising. A lot of people saying him as the main man, the leader. He wasn't. The charismatic leader, the trade union agitator of the events behind all the planning, was Lewis Lewis. Again, another character. So much is written about him, but we know so little. From the legends of the reason why he was pardoned and not hanged was he was the illegitimate son of a local squire. Well, if he was the illegitimate son of a local squire, if the government wanted to hang him, they would have hanged him. I myself, after 30 years research or more, think he turned King's evidence against Dic Penderyn, and that's what we want. But until we get the documentation, it's still a huge question mark. Why did the workers rebel in the largest town in Wales, largest industrial town in Wales? A population of 36 to 40,000 at the time. We don't know if we get it. There's no accurate census returns. But put it in perspective, Cardiff, Swansea, and Newport, times 2 would fit into Dowlas. Not Merthyr, would fit into a suburb of Merthyr called Dowlas. Cardiff only overtook the population of Merthyr in 1868, I believe. And Merthyr had been running as an iron town for 118 years. What do the workers want? Well, first and foremost, they wanted union rights. They had no union rights, therefore no political power. They had poor wages, therefore no economic power. Wages were always subject to cuts. In a 10-year period, you'd have 3 or 4 good years, then 3 or 4 bad years, then the next 4 or 5 years you might be not in work. No dole, no workout system, so you starve, die, a life of crime, or emigrate. Dangerous working conditions, death in the ironworks in Merthyr and anywhere else in Wales was daily. Matter of fact, in Merthyr it was so bad that the ironworks, the injuries to arms and legs were so bad they turned over part of the ironworks to make artificial limbs. This happened daily. No health and safety in those days. What was the housing like? Well, the housing was extremely bad. They were death traps. They were one up, one down. And if you read history books, they tend to give you a lovely impression of these workers' cottages in Merthyr. They were extremely rare. Houses were rare in Merthyr. When Merthyr expanded, it expanded so fast there was no infrastructure. There was one road in and one road out. The best way to compare Merthyr this time is a shanty town. Think of South Africa under apartheid. Zinc sheets stuck up against the wall. That was the bulk of the workers. A lot of them slept in ditches, in open fields. There were no houses. What houses you had? One up, one down, rat infested, no heating, no lighting, no windows. If you had a window and a back door, it's extra rent. You were charging the absolute limits for these slums. All leading up to the cause of the riots. No fresh water, no sewerage. You got all your water from the tap. Everything was dumped in the tap. It was rat infested. You put a glass, you wouldn't need to be a scientist to say it's filthy. Dead bodies were dumped in there. Cholera victims, murder victims from the no-go area of Merthyr, Chinatown. Slit their throat, rob them, dump them in the tap. So no back-to-back houses. So without the vote, without no trade union rights or any other rights, there's no good petitioning government. They don't listen to you. It's no good having umpteen committees, passing resolutions. They won't listen to you. So the workers, no political rights, no economic rights, they're not being listened. The last straw is a riot. This is more than a riot, it was an uprising. 10,000 workers who planned it. The government believed Merthyr would go first. Cardiff, Swansea, Newport, the domino effect all the way up to London. The workers took control of the town and held it from the British Army for 5 days. An event that's never happened before and never happened since. Don't forget the British Army at that time was boasted as being the best in Europe, therefore the best in the world. And they were kept out of the town by the workers. The workers have got to be taught a lesson. But I don't want to go over again what happened with Merthyr, we already know that. Who were the heroes of 1831? Dic Penderyn? Yes. Lewis? Yes. The trade unionists that were sacked and in prison? Yes. But the most important heroes, 99% of historians forget about them, were the women. The women worked the same hours as the men. 12 to 15 hours a day. They got home, they cooked for the men, they mended their clothes, they dealt with all their complaints, they looked after children, blah, 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 blah. The 24 hours in the day and the women worked 28. They're the real heroes. To emphasize it more, when the army fired on the crowds, it was the women who faced the bayonets that dragged their loved ones behind, up the mountainside, out of the way. If you were caught and convicted of being a member of the trade union, you were sacked straight away. The workers weren't organised, but the ironmasters were. They're the finest system ever seen in this country. If you were blacklisted, don't forget there's no mobile phones, there's no Sky TV. If you were blacklisted, you didn't work in England, Wales or Scotland again, unless you change your identity completely. Children worked in the ironworks, children worked in the mines. As a matter of fact, a good cynic would say children were the backbone of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution would have never survived without the children, working 12 to 15 hours a day in the mines, opening the ventilation doors. So, having said all that, it's surprising why the uprising didn't occur a lot sooner in 1831. Well, in 1831, if you've ever read Gwynalf's book, what Gwynalf says the first time, the workers started developing a working class consciousness and stopped thinking of themselves. We want better wages. The only way we can control our future is getting our own people into Parliament. And therefore the trade union becomes the most important thing. They develop a consciousness of thinking beyond themselves, thinking of the community. And the only way the community is going to benefit is getting working men into Parliament. So it was defeat in the short term for the workers. They went back for lower wages, longer week. Long term, the trade unions went underground, but better organised, came back bigger and stronger than the Chartists. And by the way, the Chartist movement would have never developed in Merthyr or Wales if it wasn't for 1831. Morgan Williams became a Chartist leader later on, seized political power in Merthyr, which was in one of the parishes at the time, controlled by the Crauchete. He got Crauchete and his lackeys seized power from him. Merthyr became the strongest and largest Chartist centre in Wales. Merthyr and the valleys developed a radical tradition, a continuity. 1831 to Chartism, Chartism to Henry Richard, a period of 40 to 50 years. We've got the same leaders who were there in 1831, are there for Chartism, are there in 1868 to elect a non-conformist, religious man, a man of the people, Henry Richard. Taking it all the way up to Kay Harvey in 1900. Merthyr developed a working class press. Soon realised the power of the media. The papers that were coming into Merthyr at the time, Times and everything, was printed in London. The Guardian, whatever was printed in Manchester or London, carried London news. Times hasn't changed, has it? So the workers, they said, let's have our own news. You can't afford to develop a paper because the government is saying, let's tax newspapers. The workers can't afford it. So they, like these, they just run off things. And that developed into not only the first working class newspaper, but the first Welsh newspaper in Merthyr. Another reason why you must remember Dic Penderyn. You must remember he was part of our culture, history and heritage. One of the reasons why we developed as a nation. We must remember, and more importantly, celebrate events like 1831. Dic Penderyn Society motto is, land without heritage is a land without soul. The soul of South Wales is the memory of Dic Penderyn in the 1831 uprising. Thank you very much.